Let me tell you something about life, and it might sting a little. The world isn't watching, and most people aren't listening. You see, we're all stars of our own drama, but to everyone else, we're background noise. And once you understand that deep in your soul, you stop performing for applause and you start building for purpose. Nobody cares if you're tired. Nobody cares if you almost made it. What they care about, if they care at all, is what you've become. So you've got two choices: wait for sympathy or work for transformation. One steals your time, the other builds your future. Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Life doesn't hand out guarantees. You can be the nicest person in the room, full of potential, bursting with ideas, and still be overlooked. Why? Because no one owes you recognition, no one owes you opportunity, and no one owes you success. That's the harsh truth. And the sooner you accept it, the sooner you get on with the real work. I used to walk around thinking someone would come tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you've got potential. We've been waiting for you." I waited. No one came. And one day, it hit me like a hammer. The world is not obligated to notice me. If I wanted to be seen, I had to become visible through my actions. If I wanted to be heard, I had to speak through results. That realization made me dangerous in a good way. You see, there's a difference between being owed and being valuable. One is entitlement, the other is growth. When you approach the world thinking it owes you something, you carry the weight of disappointment. But when you approach the world knowing you owe it your best, you begin to grow into someone the world can't ignore. Aesop once said, "He that always complains is never pitied." That stuck with me. Complaining earns you sympathy, but contribution earns you rewards. I've watched people wait around for years, hoping for someone to give them a break, when what they really needed was to give themselves a push. A man once told me, "No one helped me when I started." I said, "Congratulations, that means everything you built was yours." And that's the mindset shift. No one owes you anything, but you owe yourself everything. That's where it starts. And once you take full responsibility, things start to shift in your favor, not because they're easy, but because now, you're in control. You know, one of the most liberating days in your life is when you finally stop waiting for someone to rescue you, waiting for the right time, waiting for someone to open a door. And instead, you say to yourself, it's all on me. Now, some people get discouraged by that. They say, "But isn't that too heavy to carry?" I say no, because the moment you accept full responsibility, you gain full power. You see, when I was broke, I didn't blame the economy, I blamed my philosophy. When I was overlooked, I didn't accuse the world. I looked in the mirror. Why? Because if the problem is out there, you can't fix it. But if the problem is you, then you've got a real shot. And that's where most people get stuck. They're too busy pointing fingers to lift their hands and do the work. Socrates said, "Let him that would move the world first move himself." I figured if my world was going to change, it wouldn't be because someone handed me a better life. It would be because I built one. That's what responsibility looks like. It's the architect's blueprint, not the gambler's hope. I remember mentoring a young man once. He asked, "What's the secret to success?" I told him, "Start by owning everything." He frowned and said, "Even what wasn't my fault?" I said, "Especially that. Because when you take responsibility for things you didn't cause, you start gaining influence over outcomes you didn't think you could change. And let's be clear, it's not about blame, it's about ownership. your time, your habits, your learning, your income, your relationships. These are your tools. If they're sharp, you did that. If they're dull, well, that's on you too. The beauty is, once you know it's your responsibility, you no longer have to wait for permission to improve. That's how the future is shaped, by hands that are busy working, not hands that are waiting to be helped. Success, it doesn't need a parade. It doesn't announce itself with loud applause or flashy declarations. In fact, the real kind of success, the kind that lasts and means something, is built quietly, slowly, deliberately. It's like planting seeds in silence and letting the harvest do the talking. But most folks, they're too busy showing off empty fields, hoping someone will clap for their intentions rather than their outcomes. I learned early that noise rarely equals value. The man who truly understands his worth doesn't have to convince anyone. He just works and lets the work speak. The blacksmith doesn't shout about his hammering. He delivers the sword. The baker doesn't boast about the hours in the kitchen. He serves the bread, warm and perfect. And so must you. Talk less. Do more. That's the code. The philosopher Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. And that stayed with me. Because when you're truly focused on growth, you won't have time to convince others you're changing. They'll just notice. Your income will rise. Your energy will shift. Your discipline will sharpen. But it all begins behind the scenes, when no one's watching. It's what you do in the dark that shines later in the light. I once knew a man who spent years working in silence early mornings, late nights, studying, refining, adjusting. People laughed at his frugality, questioned his decisions, until one day the laughter stopped. Why? Because the results started speaking louder than any of their doubts ever could. His business grew, his health flourished, his family thrived. Not because he broadcasted every step, but because he stayed committed to the path when nobody clapped. You want to be respected? Don't demand it, earn it. Want to be seen? Don't shout, shine. Remember, the lion never needs to tell you it's the king. It just walks through the jungle and everything makes way. Be the lion. Let your results roar while you move in silence. Asterisk. Pain now, that's one of life's most misunderstood companions. Most people run from it, complain about it, try to numb it. But I'll tell you something I learned the hard way. Pain is not the enemy. It's the messenger. It's the teacher that shows up when you're going too fast in the wrong direction or too slow in the right one. It whispers at first, then yells if you ignore it. And if you're wise, you'll learn to listen early. There was a time in my own life when I was broke, financially, emotionally, and mentally. I had excuses. I had blame. I had plenty of reasons why others were at fault. But none of that paid the bills. None of that fed my soul. And the pain of watching others succeed while I was still stuck, that was bitter. But instead of letting that bitterness break me, I let it instruct me. I asked myself, what must I learn from this? What am I doing or not doing that's keeping me in this spot? The ancient poet Rumi said, asterisk, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Asterisk. And I found that to be true. Pain, when used properly, sharpens your focus. It humbles your ego. it forces reflection. And if you're smart, it forces action. When you touch a hot stove, you don't stay there. You learn. You adjust. You don't write essays about how unfair the stove was. You change your behavior. There's a young man I once mentored who lost everything in a failed business. He was devastated, crushed. But I told him, this pain is not your punishment. It's your preparation. Use it. Dissect it. Ask it questions. Because buried in that pain is the lesson that will guide your next success. And that's exactly what he did. He came back stronger, sharper, wiser, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. So don't waste your hurt. Don't decorate it or drown in it. Use it as a tool, a compass, a motivator. Let it teach you what comfort never will. Because pain, properly understood, is one of the best instructors life has to offer. Asterisk, it's always fascinating how the world loves the show, but rarely sees the rehearsal. People admire the finish line, but almost no one sticks around for the lonely early mornings, the quiet late nights, the sweat, the failure, the internal wrestling. That's where success is built. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. You'll notice something if you pay close attention to how the game works. The crowd shows up when you win, but they rarely notice when you're just starting out. Broke, unsure, doubted by even your own family. That's the part where most give up. But that's the part you must learn to cherish. Because if you can learn to work when no one's clapping, if you can grind when no one's watching, you're building the kind of character that wealth and fame can't fake. There was a season in my life when the nights were longer than the days, when I was reading, writing, refining ideas while others were at parties or asleep. I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing excellence. Because here's the secret. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And systems are built in quiet. A Roman statesman once said, asterisk, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Asterisk, the world will call you lucky when they see your success, but they'll never understand the preparation that preceded it. I remember walking home one night, past midnight, dead tired, from a seminar I had conducted for just a handful of people. But I showed up every time because I knew I wasn't performing for the crowd, I was preparing for the future. Because when the moment comes, when the light hits the stage, you'll be ready, and they'll call it talent. But you'll know it was discipline, and that's the kind of success that no one can take from you. The real measure of a man is not how loud the applause is when he walks across the stage, but who he becomes when the lights go out, when the crowd goes home, and when there's no one left to impress but himself. That's when character either rises or crumbles. And here's the truth. Applause fades, but character echoes. It's the one thing that endures long after the crowd forgets your name. We live in a world that chases validation like it's oxygen. But let me tell you, if applause is your fuel, you'll run out of steam the moment it gets quiet. I've seen men build entire identities on attention. But when the attention stops, so do they. That's a dangerous place to live. You want to build a life so rooted in discipline, in principle, in truth, that even when nobody's clapping, you still show up at your best. I remember a time early in my journey when I finally started seeing success, and for a brief moment, I started to believe in the cheers more than in the craft. It didn't take long for life to correct me. A few failures, a few cold nights, a few lost opportunities, and suddenly I was face to face with myself again. It was a sobering lesson, one I needed, because applause is borrowed, but character is earned. Aristotle once said, asterisk, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Asterisk, that means your value isn't in what they say about you after a good performance. It's in how you prepare every day, even when there's no audience. And if you can keep showing up with integrity, humility, and consistency, then applause becomes a bonus, not a necessity. Build the kind of character that still shows up strong after the ovation stops, because in the end, the only person who has to live with your choices is you. So here's where it all comes together. You've heard the truth, not the sugar-coated kind, but the kind that wakes you up at 5 a.m. and tells you the world owes you nothing. Nobody cares how you feel about the mountain. They'll only notice when you've climbed it. Life rewards the doers, not the doubters. So stop waiting for someone to hand you clarity, opportunity, or motivation. Dig deep, take responsibility, and give the world your results, not your reasons. You don't need applause to begin. You don't need agreement to grow. What you need is a commitment so strong, even your worst days can't break it. And once you learn to silence the noise, embrace the pain, and outwork the shadows, you become the kind of person who commands success, not begs for it. Now the choice is yours. You can go back to hoping someone notices your potential, or you can start becoming impossible to ignore. Work harder, focus sharper, and let the grind whisper what your voice never needs to shout. Start today, not tomorrow, not when it's easier. Right now, because nobody cares until you do.